The deadly sun's grip. The planet was dying. The once vibrant world now lay scorched, its surface cracked and barren. The sun, once a comforting source of warmth and life, had grown angry. It burned hotter, closer, relentless. Its rays were no longer life-giving but destructive. The atmosphere had thinned, and the air was thick with the stench of burning earth. The sky glowed a fiery orange, casting an eerie, almost apocalyptic light over the land. The winds, hot and dry like the breath of a furnace, swept across the desert-like plains, stirring the dust into clouds that blotted out what little was left of the once blue sky. There was no escape from the sun's heat. It was everywhere, on the ground, in the air, and deep inside the souls of the few survivors who still clung to life. Among them was a woman. Her name was Arya, though in a place like this, names seemed almost meaningless. She had once been a scientist, a hopeful explorer searching for new life and new civilizations, but now all she could do was survive, and even that was becoming impossible. Arya staggered across the landscape, her body battered and weak. Her skin was red, blistered from the sun's burning touch. Sweat poured down her face, but it dried almost instantly, leaving her parched and desperate for relief. She had been walking for what felt like days, though she wasn't sure. Time had lost its meaning. The world's days were numbered, and so, it seemed, was hers. The heat was unbearable. The sun's rays pounded down on her with unrelenting force. It felt as though the planet was being squeezed by the sun, its core burning hotter with each passing minute. The temperature had reached a point where the ground itself felt as if it might burst into flames at any moment. The air shimmered with the heat, making everything look like a mirage. There was no water, no shelter. The land was a wasteland, and Arya was trapped in it. Her vision blurred as the heat continued to drain her strength. She could feel her body shutting down. Her legs were barely holding her up, each step a struggle. She could hardly breathe. Her lungs burned, every inhale sharp and painful. She had to keep moving, but the world around her was slowly fading to black. Just a little farther, she muttered to herself, though she wasn't sure why. There was no promise of safety ahead, no shelter, no rescue. It was all just a faint hope she clung to, an illusion that perhaps, somehow, she could survive. The ground beneath her feet cracked, a sharp sound that echoed through the silence of the dying world. Arya stumbled but caught herself before falling. Her hands shook as she wiped the sweat from her eyes, her breath shallow. Ahead, she saw something, a figure, a silhouette moving against the blinding light of the sun. For a moment, Arya thought it was a trick of the heat, a hallucination born from the extreme conditions. But as the figure drew closer, she could tell it was real. It was a human, a man, tall and strong, moving with purpose. His face was hidden behind a mask, his body covered in protective armor designed for survival in this scorched world. The man's presence was like a beacon in the vast desert, a sign of life in a land where life was quickly vanishing. Arya's heart beat faster, her pulse racing with a sudden burst of hope. She had heard rumors of people like him, survivors who were determined to save what little remained of humanity. But she hadn't expected to find one here, not in the heart of the wasteland, where the sun's grip was the strongest. Her legs gave out and she collapsed to her knees, the ground beneath her burning hot. She gasped for air, struggling to stay conscious. She needed to get to him. She needed help. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse, "help me." The man approached without hesitation. There was no fear in his steps, no sign of doubt. He had a mission, and he was here to complete it. He knelt beside Arya, his gloved hand reaching out to her. "You're going to be okay?" he said, his voice calm and reassuring, though his words seemed to carry the weight of someone who had seen too much death. He didn't waste time with questions. There was no need. It was clear what was happening. The sun was killing her, and it was killing him too. But unlike Arya, he had something to fight for, something to protect. He gently lifted her into his arms, his strength surprising for someone so weathered by the harsh conditions. His eyes, visible above the mask, were filled with determination. "Hold on," he said, "just a little longer." Arya tried to speak, to thank him, but her body was too weak. She could barely keep her eyes open. The heat was suffocating, and she was losing the battle against it. The last thing she saw before she closed her eyes was the man's face, his brow furrowed in concentration as he carried her across the desert, away from the deadly grip of the sun. For the first time in what felt like forever, Arya allowed herself to feel something other than fear. Hope. It was a small, fragile thing, but it was there. She had survived for now. And maybe, just maybe, humanity had a chance too. But the sun was still there, burning brighter with every passing moment. The world was still dying. Would they survive long enough to make a difference? Would anyone? Only time would tell. The last hope of humanity. The heat was unbearable, but the man carried Arya with a quiet resolve. Each step he took was measured, determined, as though every second mattered. He could feel the scorching air biting at his skin, the oppressive weight of the sun hanging above them like an executioner's blade, waiting to fall. But there was no time to stop, no time to rest. He had a purpose. He had to keep moving. His name was Kieran. Unlike the others who had succumbed to the sun's fury, Kieran was one of the few who had survived long enough to find a solution, a way to fight back against the planet's slow destruction. He wasn't just a survivor, he was the last hope for humanity. The ground beneath him was cracked and dry, each step sending up tiny puffs of dust, the remnants of a world that had once been alive. There were no trees, no animals, only the barren land and the endless sky above. Kieran had been here for weeks, tracking the signs of life, searching for survivors. Every day the sun's rays grew hotter, more intense. The earth was dying, and with it, humanity's last chances of survival. As he carried Arya, he couldn't help but think of the others, the ones who had died before him, those who had been burned alive by the sun or had given up long before the heat had even reached this level. They were the ones who hadn't understood the severity of the situation until it was too late. But Kieran had always known. He was trained to know when the world was in danger. He had been one of the first to understand what the sun was becoming, what it had always been capable of, but no one had believed him. Now Kieran was alone, almost alone. Arya stirred in his arms, her lips parted, her breath shallow. She was barely conscious, but she wasn't gone yet. The mask he wore over his face shifted slightly as he glanced down at her. He could see the faint glow of the planet's reflection in her eyes, but there was no panic, no fear. Only pain and maybe a sliver of hope. "Hold on, Arya," he whispered under his breath, his voice strained with exhaustion. "Just hold on." He had to find shelter, he had to find safety, but the world around him offered no refuge. The sun was everywhere. The planet's atmosphere was fragile, and the heat was not just from the sun's rays, it was from a greater force, an unseen hand that controlled the sun's fury. And the closer he got to the source, the more it began to make sense. Arya had been his first hope, a symbol that there was still life to save. But now, as he trudged through the endless wasteland, he knew the truth. The sun wasn't just a natural disaster, it was a weapon created by an enemy that had not yet shown itself. Kieran had learned about this threat during his time on Earth's last surviving research base. Scientists had theorized that the sun was being manipulated by some unknown force, but no one had ever been able to prove it. Until now. Why her? He thought, glancing at Arya once more. Why is she the one still alive? The answer came to him like a whisper in the wind. Arya was no ordinary survivor. She had something inside her, a unique resistance to the sun's energy. He didn't know exactly what it was, but he had seen it before in small, isolated groups of humans who were untouched by the sun's radiation. A genetic anomaly, maybe, something engineered, or perhaps something else entirely. It didn't matter for now. What mattered was that Arya was still alive, and she was his only lead. She might hold the key to stopping this catastrophe, or at least to surviving it. Kieran's heart raced. He could feel the heat becoming more intense with each passing minute. The closer they got to their destination, the hotter it became. It was as though the sun itself was alive, pushing them, testing their strength. But Kieran wasn't going to give in. Not now. Not when humanity's last hope was cradled in his arms. He reached a narrow ravine in the landscape, a dark, shadowy place that seemed to offer some relief from the sun's oppressive heat. The ravine had once been a riverbed, long since dried up, but the coolness of the rock walls provided shelter. Kieran ducked inside, his muscles aching from the weight of carrying Arya. He lowered her gently onto the ground, pulling off his heavy survival gear to make himself more comfortable. The heat in the ravine was still sweltering, but here there was some semblance of protection. Kieran knelt beside Arya, checking her pulse. It was faint, but it was still there. Her skin, though burned, was starting to show signs of life again. Her breathing was shallow, but it was steady. Kieran's mind raced with possibilities, his fingers brushing her forehead. What had happened to her? How had she survived this long while the others had perished? Before he could dwell too long on his questions, the ground shook beneath him. It was a subtle tremor at first, but then it grew, causing the walls of the ravine to groan as if they were about to crumble. Kieran jumped to his feet, instinctively pulling Arya closer to him. He wasn't sure what was happening, but he could feel it. Something was changing. The sun's power was intensifying, and whatever was causing it, whatever force had manipulated the sun to this extent, was drawing closer. The tremors grew stronger. Kieran's heart pounded in his chest. The enemy was coming, and this time he wasn't sure if anyone, not even the last hope of humanity, could stop them. "Stay with me, Arya," he whispered, his voice tight. "We're not done yet." The battle for humanity had only just begun. And in the distance, something in the sky began to stir, a shadow moving against the fiery orange glow of the dying sun. The enemy was coming. The struggle to reach her. The tremors beneath Kieran's feet grew more intense, sending cracks spiderwebbing across the ravine's walls. A low, rumbling sound filled the air, like the world itself was about to tear apart. Arya's body trembled in his arms, still unconscious, but Kieran could feel the faint heat rising from her, the desperation of her body trying to survive in the face of an enemy that had no mercy. The sun's grip on the world wasn't just about its heat. It was about control, an invisible force that manipulated the very elements. The planet had become a playground for whoever was behind it all, and Kieran had a sickening feeling that this force wasn't just an accident. It was intentional. But who could do this? Who had the power to control the sun, to burn a planet alive from the inside out? Kieran had theories, some far-fetched, others more plausible, but now was not the time to ponder them. He needed to focus on the task at hand, get Arya to safety and figure out what made her so special. If she held the key to the planet's survival, then Kieran was going to make sure she didn't die here, alone in the desert. The sky outside the ravine darkened as the tremors worsened, followed by an eerie silence. The air grew thick with tension. Kieran's senses sharpened, his fingers tightening around the weapon at his side. There was no telling what was coming for them, but he wasn't about to let it take Arya. As he shifted Arya in his arms, Kieran's eyes scanned the distance, his mind calculating his next move. His instincts told him that something wasn't right. He had felt the energy shift, a strange, almost unnatural pull in the atmosphere, and then the rumbling that followed it. The enemy was drawing nearer, and it wasn't just the heat that had become unbearable. The very ground beneath them was shifting, like something massive was moving underneath. In the distance, a faint shadow moved across the horizon, a silhouette that seemed too large to be a mere storm cloud or a mirage. Kieran's heart raced as he took in the sight. The figure seemed to pulse with energy, an unnatural aura that made his skin crawl. "Not good," he muttered to himself, taking a deep breath. The sun had started to grow even more oppressive, its rays blinding as it reflected off the rocky walls. But this wasn't just the sun. This was something else, something far worse. The shadow in the distance grew clearer, and Kieran's eyes widened with disbelief. It was a ship, but not like any ship he had ever seen. It hovered silently, casting a dark shadow over the land, and its shape was not human. No, this was something far more alien, something that had been buried beneath the planet's surface for eons, something that had awakened. Kieran moved quickly, trying to shield Arya from the worst of the heat. He needed to get out of the ravine and find shelter before they were spotted. But as the ship drew closer, he realized they were already too late. The ground trembled again, and this time it was not just a vibration. It was a force. Kieran could feel the power building up beneath his feet. The ship had arrived, and it wasn't here for a peaceful meeting. The moment the ship landed, the air seemed to hum with an intense energy. The heat grew almost unbearable as a sharp, crackling sound filled the air. Kieran's eyes narrowed as he grabbed Arya and tried to find cover. There was no place to hide here, just the ravine and the harsh desert. But maybe that was enough. If he could use the terrain to his advantage, he might be able to escape. But then, as if answering Kieran's thoughts, the ground beneath the ravine began to crumble. The earth split open, and out of the depths rose a figure. This one wasn't a machine or ship. It was humanoid, but far from human. It was tall, towering over Kieran. Its skin shimmered, a metallic blue hue that reflected the light of the dying sun. Its eyes glowed with an eerie, unnatural light, and its features were sharp and angular, not at all like any human he had ever seen. Its presence alone seemed to distort the air, creating a palpable sense of dread. "Who are you?" Kieran demanded, his voice steady, though his heart pounded in his chest. "What do you want?" The creature didn't answer with words. Instead, it tilted its head slightly, as if studying Kieran before its glowing eyes flickered toward Arya. It took a slow step forward, and the ground beneath it seemed to pulse with energy. Kieran instinctively took a step back, positioning himself between Arya and the creature. He wasn't afraid, at least, not in the way he should be. But he knew he wasn't going to make it out of this without a fight. He had never faced anything like this before, and even if he did survive, Arya's survival was uncertain. She was still too weak, too fragile. "Stay back," Kieran warned, his hand on the weapon at his side. The creature didn't seem intimidated. Instead, it raised a hand, and the air around it crackled with a strange energy. "She's the key," the creature finally spoke, its voice smooth but chilling, as though it was made of metal and ice. "She is the one who can stop it." Kieran's mind raced. He wasn't sure what the creature meant, but there was no doubt it was talking about Arya. How could she be the key? And to what? To the destruction of the world, to the sun's relentless power. "She's not yours," Kieran growled, stepping forward to protect Arya. The creature's eyes gleamed. "She is ours," it said coldly. "You cannot save her, you cannot save yourself." Kieran's grip tightened on his weapon, but before he could make a move, the creature raised its hand again. A wave of energy surged toward him, knocking him off his feet. He crashed to the ground, pain shooting through his body. The air around him was thick with a strange energy, suffocating, paralyzing him. But as the creature moved closer, Kieran felt a strange pulse in his chest. Something was coming from Arya, a warmth, a power, something he couldn't quite understand. She wasn't just a survivor, she was fighting back. In that moment, Kieran realized the truth. Arya wasn't just the key to stopping the sun's destruction. She was the key to defeating this enemy. The battle for humanity wasn't over. It had only just begun, and now it was time to find out what Arya truly was. The enemy had arrived, but so had humanity's last hope. The awakening of power. Kieran lay on the ground, his body trembling from the force of the energy that had knocked him back. His vision blurred, and for a moment he thought the world was spinning out of control. But through the haze, he could still see the creature standing over him, its glowing eyes watching him with cold, calculated interest. Arya was still unconscious, but something had changed. There was a strange pulse in the air, a vibration that came from her. It wasn't just the power of the sun. No, this was something different, something ancient, something that had lain dormant within her. Kieran pushed himself up, his hands digging into the cracked earth beneath him. The pain was sharp, but it was nothing compared to the feeling of fear that gripped his chest. He had to protect her. He had to figure out what was happening. The creature stood silently, its eyes shifting between Kieran and Arya. It seemed to be waiting for something. It was almost as if it knew that the moment was coming, the moment when Arya's power would reveal itself. But Kieran didn't wait for the creature to act. He lunged forward, his weapon raised. He wasn't sure if it would make a difference, but he wasn't going to let this creature touch Arya. Not when he finally understood what she meant, what she could mean. As he moved toward her, the ground beneath him began to hum with energy. The air felt thick, like static electricity crackling around his body. His every muscle was tense, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He had never felt this kind of power before. And then it happened. Arya's body stirred. At first, it was just a slight movement, a twitch of her fingers, a shallow breath. But then the energy in the air intensified. It wasn't from the creature. No, this was something coming from her, something deep within her, something she hadn't been able to control. The pulse of power grew stronger, and Kieran stumbled back, his mind racing. The creature seemed to sense the change as well. Its glowing eyes narrowed, and it took a step forward, but this time it wasn't with the same confidence. It was cautious, as if it knew something had shifted and it wasn't sure if it was ready for what was about to happen. Arya's eyes fluttered open and Kieran froze. Her pupils were dilated, her irises glowing faintly with a silver-blue light. She looked up at him, her gaze soft but focused, as if she had just awoken from a long, deep sleep. Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. "Arya," Kieran whispered, his voice low with concern. "Are you?" Before he could finish, a shockwave of energy burst from her, throwing Kieran off his feet once more. The creature recoiled, its posture tense, almost defensive. The wave was not like anything Kieran had ever seen, too raw, too powerful. It felt as though the very fabric of reality had been momentarily bent. Arya's body rose slightly from the ground, hovering just an inch above it. Her hands began to glow with that same eerie silver-blue energy, and the air around her crackled like a storm was about to break loose. The heat from the sun felt insignificant in comparison to the power she now radiated. Kieran could feel the weight of it pressing against him, pushing against the air, and for a moment it felt like the entire planet had come alive. "What's happening to her?" Kieran muttered, unable to take his eyes off her. The creature, now fully alert, took another step back, its body tensing as if it were preparing for battle. It raised its hand, summoning a shield of dark energy that seemed to absorb the light around it. Its eyes never left Arya. "She is awakening," the creature spoke, its voice still as cold and emotionless as before. "The power inside her has been dormant for centuries. You have no idea what you are dealing with." Arya's eyes locked onto the creature, and Kieran felt a wave of emotion wash over him. She wasn't just a survivor of the sun's wrath. She was a force tied to the very core of the planet itself, and somehow this creature knew it. "Why?" Kieran's voice cracked as he spoke, his mind struggling to keep up with what was happening. "Why is she the key?" The creature tilted its head, almost as if it were considering how best to respond. "The sun is not just a star. It is a weapon, an engine of destruction controlled by forces far beyond your comprehension. And she," it paused, its eyes narrowing, "is the weapon that can stop it." Kieran's blood ran cold. "What do you mean? She's not a weapon, she's just a person, she's just Arya." "No," the creature hissed, its tone growing more menacing. "She is a weapon. She was created to be one, to wield the sun's energy, to harness it and turn it against those who sought to destroy your world." Kieran stepped forward, his fists clenched. "No one created her. She was born just like any other human. You're lying." The creature's eyes glowed brighter, a hint of amusement flickering in its expression. "You do not understand. She was born for this purpose. She was the last hope of your species, and now she is awakening to fulfill her role." Kieran's mind raced. What was this creature talking about? Arya wasn't some weapon, she couldn't be. But the way she was glowing, the power radiating from her, he couldn't deny that something had changed. Before he could respond, Arya's voice broke through the tension. "Kieran," she whispered, her voice weak but steady, "I don't know what's happening, but I can feel it." She looked at him, her expression a mixture of confusion and determination. "I can feel the sun. It's not just burning me anymore. It's inside me. It's in my blood." The realization hit Kieran like a hammer. She wasn't just surviving the sun's rays. She was connected to them. And that connection had awakened something within her, something ancient, something powerful. The creature's voice echoed again. "She is the key, the final piece of the puzzle. With her we can control the sun. With her we can remake this world." Kieran's heart pounded in his chest. He had no idea what to believe anymore. Arya, the woman who had been just a survivor like him, was now the weapon they had been searching for all along. And the enemy, the creature standing before them, wanted her for one purpose only: to destroy everything. Kieran's mind snapped back into focus. The world was on the brink of destruction, and Arya was their only hope, but she was also their greatest danger. "I won't let you take her," Kieran growled, his hand tightening around the weapon at his side. The creature's eyes flickered with amusement. "You cannot stop this. It is already too late." But Kieran wasn't going to give up. Not now. Not when the entire future of humanity rested in their hands. "I'll stop you," he said, determination flooding his voice. "I'll stop all of you." And with that, the battle for the future of the world had truly begun. The shadow of power. The creature's laughter echoed in the ravine, chilling and dark, reverberating through the air like a funeral dirge. Arya's glowing hands dropped to her sides, her body swaying slightly as though she were struggling to control the power swirling inside her. Kieran felt the tension in the air shift, as if the very earth was waiting for what came next. The creature's dark energy shield flickered, and for a moment Kieran thought he saw something beneath it, something almost human, yet far more sinister. The creature's voice came again, low and measured. "You still do not understand, do you?" it said. "The sun is not the only weapon. Arya is the key to ending this world and remaking it in our image. You fight not only for survival, but against something much larger than your comprehension. Humanity's time is at an end." Kieran took a step forward, his pulse pounding in his ears. The creature had power, yes, but Arya had something else, something primal. He could see it in her eyes now, the determination, the struggle to control the force inside her. She wasn't just going to stand by and let this alien force take her. She was ready to fight. He wasn't sure how much longer he could keep up the illusion of confidence, but he knew one thing: he had to protect Arya. She wasn't just the key to stopping this enemy. She was human, and as long as she was human, there was hope. Arya's voice broke through his thoughts. Her eyes were wild, and there was a strange calmness to her now. "I can feel it, Kieran. It's in my blood, in my bones, it's everywhere. The sun's power, it's connected to me. It's trying to control me." The creature shifted, taking a step toward her, its eyes glowing brighter. "The sun does not control you, child. You were created to control it." Kieran's heart raced as he turned to face Arya. She looked at him with a mixture of confusion and clarity, as though everything was beginning to make sense to her, but at the same time, she felt trapped. "I can't fight it," she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "It's too much. I can't control it." "You can," Kieran said, his voice firm but his mind racing. He had no idea how she could control it, but he had to make her believe it. "You have to believe you can. You've always been human. This power is just another part of you. You're not a weapon, you're Arya, and that's enough." The creature's dark energy pulsed around them, the very air crackling with power. Its glowing eyes flicked between Arya and Kieran, studying them with an almost bored curiosity. "You don't understand, human. This world is a relic of a failed experiment. Your species was meant to fall. The sun's energy, your power, was meant to serve us. It was never yours to control." Arya's eyes widened, as though she had heard something that shook her to the core. She lifted her trembling hand toward the creature, and for the first time, Kieran saw the power within her, not out of control, but contained, swirling in an intricate dance of energy, like a storm on the verge of breaking. "No," she said softly, but with undeniable strength. "This world was never yours to control either." The creature flinched, just for a moment, its posture tense, as though it hadn't anticipated this defiance. The air around Arya shimmered, the energy she had awakened swirling in patterns too complex to describe, like intricate lines of light racing through the air. Kieran moved slowly, cautiously, still keeping his eyes on the creature. "Arya," he said, his voice soft but intense. "Whatever this is, whatever you're feeling right now, this is your strength. You're not alone in this." For a moment there was silence. The air felt thick, the crackling energy hanging like a heavy fog. Arya closed her eyes, her breath slow and deep, as if gathering every ounce of her focus. Kieran could see the tension in her body, every muscle tight, every part of her fighting to maintain control. The creature sneered, its voice dripping with disdain. "You think she can save you, human? She is a weapon, and weapons always serve their masters, no matter how hard you fight." Arya opened her eyes. There was something different in them now, a fierce, glowing determination that hadn't been there before. Her voice was calm, almost serene. "I don't serve anyone." With a sudden surge of energy, the atmosphere around Arya exploded, sending waves of intense heat and light into the ravine. Kieran was thrown backward by the force, but he kept his eyes on her. He saw the power rising from her like a storm breaking free from its chains. The creature's eyes widened, its dark shield faltering for the first time, as though it had underestimated what Arya was truly capable of. The air pulsed with a deep, resonant hum as if the earth itself were responding to her power. She lifted her hands, the energy swirling around her, crackling and sparking in the air. The ground beneath them trembled once more, but this time it wasn't because of the creature's dark power. It was Arya's. She was controlling it. Kieran felt a surge of hope course through him. "Do it," Kieran shouted, his voice urgent. "Arya, fight back." The creature raised its hand again, ready to strike. But before it could move, Arya's power lashed out like a whip, sending a blast of energy directly at the creature. The dark shield around it flickered, crackled, and then shattered, the force of Arya's attack slamming into the creature with a blinding burst of light. The alien being staggered back, its form flickering like a hologram, losing its signal. It shrieked, a horrible, screeching sound that seemed to tear at the very fabric of reality. But the creature wasn't done yet. It steadied itself, glaring at Arya with a renewed fury. "You cannot destroy me," it hissed. "I am beyond you." But Arya didn't flinch. She stepped forward, her hands glowing brighter with every step. "Maybe, but I'm not trying to destroy you." Her voice was cold and steady now. "I'm trying to save this world." The ground beneath them cracked, and suddenly the ravine began to split apart, the earth groaning as though it were being torn from its foundations. A deep rumbling filled the air, and the sun's heat intensified, as though reacting to the power Arya had unlocked. Kieran's heart raced as he watched her, now fully alive with the energy coursing through her. Arya wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was the sun's equal, its opposite force. The creature took one final step back, its eyes flickering with something close to fear. "You're more dangerous than I thought," it murmured, before it vanished into a cloud of dark smoke, leaving behind only the lingering scent of burning metal. For a moment there was only silence. The air was still, but the energy that had filled the ravine lingered like the aftershock of a storm. Kieran didn't know what had just happened, but one thing was clear: the battle wasn't over. The enemy had only retreated for now, and they would return. But as Arya stood there, her body still glowing with the energy of the sun, Kieran knew one thing for sure: they had a chance. They had the power to fight back, and together they would face whatever came next. The war had only just begun. The hidden force. The ravine was quiet now, almost eerily so. The ground still trembled faintly beneath their feet, as though the earth itself hadn't fully recovered from the shockwaves that had surged through it. Kieran stood up slowly, brushing the dust from his clothes, his eyes never leaving Arya. She was standing there, her chest rising and falling with every breath, her body still pulsing with an unnatural energy. Her power had surged, yes, but it was clear now that it was still growing. The air around her shimmered with the remnants of that otherworldly glow, as though the very atmosphere couldn't decide whether it wanted to become a storm or settle into calm. Kieran took a step toward her, his voice gentle but filled with urgency. "Arya, are you okay?" She blinked, the silver-blue glow in her eyes slowly fading as she looked at him. Her face was pale, her lips slightly parted as if she were still processing everything that had happened. But there was something else in her gaze now, something that wasn't just fear. It was understanding. I think I've only just begun to understand it," Arya said, her voice soft but steady. "This power, it's mine, but it's not just mine. It's connected to something much bigger. The sun, the force that controls it. It's not what I thought it was." She took a deep breath, looking out into the distance, her voice almost distant. "There's a whole network of it, Kieran. The energy doesn't just come from the sun. It's connected to the entire planet, to everything." Kieran nodded, trying to make sense of her words. "So, it's not just about the sun, it's about the balance of everything. The whole world is tied to this energy." Arya turned to face him fully, her eyes clearer now, more focused. "Yes, it's like a heartbeat. The sun's power is one part, but there's a much darker force at play. It's not just the creature. There's something else, something bigger, hidden beneath the surface of the planet. And it's manipulating the sun's energy. It wants to bring everything to its knees." Kieran's stomach twisted. The creature they had faced earlier, though powerful, had been only a part of a much larger puzzle. And this hidden force Arya was talking about, it felt more dangerous than anything they had yet encountered. "Then we have to find it, before it finds us," Kieran said, his voice hard with determination. Arya's expression faltered for a moment, her eyes clouded with doubt. But Kieran, if what I'm feeling is true, I'm not sure how to stop it. I'm only beginning to understand the power within me. If I can't control it, it could destroy everything. Kieran reached out, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. You've already controlled it, Arya. You've kept yourself from losing it. You're more in control than you think. But Arya shook her head. What if it's not enough? What if I'm just a pawn in all of this? Kieran's heart tightened, but he knew he couldn't let her doubt herself. Not now. We'll figure it out together. You're not a pawn, you're more than that. We're going to stop this no matter what it takes. The silence between them felt heavy, the weight of their shared mission pressing down on both of them. And just as Kieran was about to speak again, a low hum filled the air, a vibration that seemed to shake the very ground they stood on. Something was coming. Kieran's hand instinctively went to the weapon at his side, his eyes scanning the horizon. Arya's hands flared with energy once again, but this time it wasn't as uncontrolled. It was focused, contained, like a quiet storm brewing. Out of the distance, a new presence emerged, a dark shape in the sky slowly descending toward them. Kieran's breath caught in his throat as he recognized it. The ship. It wasn't the same one as before, but it was just as menacing. The silhouette was massive, a hulking presence that seemed to swallow the sky as it descended, and it was heading straight toward them. Arya, Kieran said, his voice urgent. We need to move now. But Arya didn't move. She stood frozen, her eyes locked on the descending craft. There was a strange calmness about her now. Her powers had shifted once again, no longer desperate but purposeful. They're here, she said softly, her voice almost hypnotic. They've come for me. Kieran turned to her in confusion. What do you mean? We need to go, Arya. But she just stared at the ship as it grew closer, the hum of its engines growing louder. It was too late to run. The ship was already here, and the force inside it was too powerful to ignore. A voice boomed from the ship, reverberating through the air, a voice that seemed to carry both authority and menace. Arya, the voice said, cold and commanding. You have no choice, your power is ours now, you were made for this. Kieran's grip on his weapon tightened. He could feel the air growing thicker as the ship's shadow loomed over them. This time, it wasn't just the creature they had to worry about. There was something much larger at play. Arya stood tall, her fists clenched at her sides. I won't let you control me. I will never be yours. The voice from the ship only grew louder, more insistent. You cannot fight your destiny, Arya. You were created for a singular purpose. Your power will not remain a mystery forever. Come with us. Kieran felt the tension in the air grow heavier, the energy around them crackling with anticipation. He looked at Arya, his mind racing. They couldn't let this happen. This ship, this voice, it was more than just an enemy. It was a force of domination, and it had come for them. You don't have to do this, Arya, Kieran said urgently. We can find another way. Arya's expression hardened, her gaze focused on the descending ship. There was something different in her eyes now, something primal. Her power surged again, the energy around her intensifying. I won't be a tool, she said firmly. Not for them, not for anyone. Kieran watched, amazed and terrified, as Arya reached out toward the sky, her hands glowing with that fierce energy. The power she wielded was immense, almost overwhelming. He could feel it, feel the pulse of it, as if the sun itself were reacting to her every movement. And then, with a sudden burst of light, Arya's energy shot up into the sky, a brilliant beam of silver-blue light that struck the descending ship. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The ship's hull groaned as it absorbed the energy, flickering with an unnatural intensity. The force of Arya's power shook the very air around them, creating a vortex of wind and light. Kieran barely had time to brace himself before the ship's engines sputtered, and it began to spin out of control. Arya's eyes were locked on the ship, her face a mixture of exhaustion and determination. I won't let them use me, she muttered, almost to herself. The ship faltered in the air, its descent now erratic, but it wasn't finished. It was only just beginning, and Kieran knew this was only the first battle of many. The world was about to change, but Arya was no longer just a bystander. She was the force they had to reckon with. And no matter how dark the enemy seemed, Kieran wasn't going to let her stand alone. The war had just shifted, and it was only getting started. The awakening storm. The ship crashed with a deafening roar, its massive bulk tearing through the jagged rocks and leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. The ground trembled beneath Kieran's feet as dust and debris clouded the air, settling into a thick, choking fog. For a moment, everything was still. Arya stood at the edge of the ravine, her energy slowly fading as the brilliant silver-blue light dimmed around her. Her breath was ragged, her body shaking with the aftershock of releasing such immense power. But she didn't take her eyes off the wreckage, watching as the ship's twisted remains smoldered in the distance. "That was intense," Kieran said, his voice tinged with awe and concern. He moved to her side, offering her a steady hand, though he wasn't sure if she would take it. But she didn't need it. She was stronger than that now. Arya looked at him, her eyes reflecting the same fierce energy that had powered her moments ago. But there was something darker in them too, an unsettling awareness. This isn't over. They'll come for us again, and next time they won't just send one ship." Kieran nodded grimly, his mind already racing through their options. They couldn't stay here. The crash had only slowed the inevitable. Whatever force controlled the ship, whatever had sent it, it would regroup and it would find them. "Then we move," he said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty gnawing at him. "We don't wait around for them to recover, we take the fight to them." But Arya didn't immediately respond. She stood there, her gaze locked on the smoking wreck, as if she were listening to something that Kieran couldn't hear. Her body trembled, and it wasn't just from exhaustion anymore. There was something more beneath the surface, something growing inside her, a power she couldn't quite control, but also couldn't deny. Kieran noticed it too, the way the ground beneath their feet seemed to pulse with each breath she took. The air had shifted once more, charged with an energy that felt different from before. The sun itself seemed to glare down more intensely, as though it were watching them, judging them, waiting for the next move. "Arya," Kieran said, his voice laced with concern, "are you okay?" She turned to him slowly, her face pale, but there was an intensity in her eyes that he had never seen before. "I can feel it, Kieran," she whispered, almost as if speaking to herself. "The sun's power, it's alive, and it's calling to me." A chill ran down Kieran's spine. He didn't fully understand what Arya meant, but he could see the truth in her eyes. The power she had tapped into was more than just a weapon. It was something alive, something that could consume her if she wasn't careful. "We need to get you somewhere safe," he said quickly, his protective instincts kicking in. "Somewhere we can figure out what's going on." But Arya shook her head, her lips curling into a tight smile. "Safe, Kieran, there is no safe anymore. The only way to stop this is to understand it, to face it head-on." Her words were heavy with finality, and Kieran could see the determination in her eyes. She wasn't going to run. Not now. Not when the answers she needed were within her reach. Before Kieran could respond, the ground beneath their feet trembled again and a low hum filled the air. This time it wasn't the ship. It was something far worse, a deep, resonating sound coming from all around them. The sky seemed to darken as the temperature dropped, the once clear air now heavy with static. Arya's eyes widened, her hands instinctively glowing with energy as the hum grew louder. "It's not over," she said, her voice tense. "Something coming, something worse." Kieran's heart pounded in his chest as he scanned the horizon, his pulse quickening with every passing second. In the distance, the air shimmered, and the sky seemed to ripple as if reality itself was warping. And then, through the distorted atmosphere, they saw it, a figure. It appeared at first like a mirage, a shadow moving across the landscape, but as it drew closer, the figure became clearer. It was humanoid, but far from human. Tall, imposing, with glowing symbols etched into its dark armor, it moved with a deliberate, calculated grace. The creature's eyes burned like twin suns, bright and unyielding, and its presence exuded an aura of power that made the ground beneath them feel like it might crumble at any moment. Kieran instinctively reached for his weapon, but Arya stopped him with a gesture. Her hand was still glowing faintly, the energy rippling with an unsettling power that made Kieran take a cautious step back. Don't, Arya said softly, her voice filled with a strange calmness. This isn't a fight we can win with weapons. The figure stopped in front of them, its glowing eyes scanning both of them, assessing them as if deciding whether they were worth the time. It spoke, its voice low and resonant, filling the air with a palpable weight. "You are not what you seem, human," it said, its words like a prophecy. "And neither is she." Arya's stance hardened, her energy flaring once again as she stepped forward, her eyes burning with defiance. "I'm done with being controlled. Whatever you are, whatever you want from me, I'm not giving it to you." The figure tilted its head slightly, its glowing eyes flickering with what could almost be mistaken for amusement. "You have no choice in the matter, Arya. The power you've unleashed is not just yours. It is part of a much larger design, and you are central to it." Kieran's hand tightened around the hilt of his weapon, his instincts screaming at him to protect Arya at all costs. But she didn't flinch. She stood firm, her energy rising like a tidal wave. "I don't care about your design," Arya said through gritted teeth. "I will not be your pawn, and I will not let you take this world." The figure stepped closer, its gaze piercing her. "You misunderstand. You are not a pawn. You are the key to a new order, and your resistance is only delaying the inevitable." Kieran's heart raced, but there was no time for fear. Not anymore. Arya was the key, but she wasn't a weapon to be used. She was the force that could change everything. They had to stop the enemy, but more importantly, they had to stop whatever was behind this force that had been pulling the strings for far too long. As the figure's words lingered in the air, Arya lifted her hands, her body glowing brighter than ever. The sun seemed to respond, its rays becoming more intense, as though it were feeding off her energy. She was no longer just a human girl caught in the middle of an alien conflict. She was the storm that could either destroy or save this world. Kieran stood by her side, his eyes fixed on the approaching figure. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about fighting back, pushing past the fear and uncertainty, and claiming their future. And as the figure raised its hand, preparing to strike, Arya took a deep breath, her power surging again, stronger than ever. The true battle was just beginning.